leave of the big silver screen for quite a long time while you raised your two sons.
That's right.
What a wonderful, wonderful option.
They got so...
William Holden once confessed that Audrey Hepburn was the love of his life, the woman he never stopped carrying in the quiet corners of his thoughts long after their paths diverged. That admission, spoken years after the cameras had stopped rolling on the set where they first collided, still carries the weight of something unfinished, something that neither fame nor time could fully erase. It is the kind of statement that forces a second look at the elegant figure the world remembers in black Givenchy and soft smiles, because behind the carefully composed image lived a woman whose deepest longing collided with an irreversible fact, and the collision left a mark that outlasted 2 marriages and decades of public adoration. Audrey Kathleen Ruston entered the world on the 4th of May 1929 in Brussels, the daughter of a Dutch baroness and a British businessman whose restless ambitions would soon fracture the household. By the time she was 6, her father, Joseph Victor Anthony Ruston, had walked out. The departure was not gradual. It was abrupt, leaving a child who had known relative comfort suddenly adrift in questions that never received answers. Biographers have long noted that Audrey herself later described this abandonment as the single most traumatic event of her childhood. Sean Hepburn Ferrer, her elder son, has written with quiet precision about how that early loss shaped an almost lifelong hunger for security and loyalty, a need that would color every romantic choice she made. The war that followed only deepened the wound. In occupied Holland she watched Jewish families herded onto trains, endured the hunger winter of 1944 when tulip bulbs became bread, and nearly died of malnutrition before penicillin arrived with the liberators. Those years taught her that safety could vanish overnight and that the people meant to protect you sometimes simply disappeared. When peace came she tried to rebuild through ballet, training with a ferocity that bordered on desperation. The body that had starved refused to become the instrument of a prima ballerina. The damage was permanent. She shifted to the stage and then to film with the same quiet determination, taking small parts, modeling, surviving. Colette spotted her in Monte Carlo and insisted she was the perfect Gigi. Roman Holiday followed, and overnight the unknown European girl became an Academy Award winner opposite Gregory Peck. Sabrina arrived next, and with it the man who would claim a permanent place in the private geography of her heart. William Holden was already an established star, the wry, handsome leading man of Sunset Boulevard and Stalag 17. On the set of Billy Wilder's romantic comedy he was 11 years older than Audrey, married, the father of 3. The production itself was tense. Humphrey Bogart, cast as the older brother, bristled at the script changes and at the easy chemistry between his younger co-stars. Crew members later recalled that Audrey and Bill found reasons to linger after the day's work, sharing dinners, driving into the California countryside with a portable record player so they could listen to ballet music under the stars. Holden would later remember those nights as some of the most magical of his life. Audrey called him the most handsome man she had ever met. The attraction was mutual, intense, and carefully hidden from the public that would have branded the young Oscar winner a homewrecker. They spoke of a future. Holden promised he would leave his wife. Audrey, who had never stopped dreaming of the family her own childhood had denied her, imagined children, 3, perhaps 4, and a quieter life away from the glare of studios. In Edward Z. Epstein's carefully researched account, Audrey and Bill, the moment of revelation arrives with the force of a quiet catastrophe. One evening, while they were talking lightly about names for those imagined children, Holden's expression changed. He told her the one thing they could never have together was children. Years earlier, at his wife's urging, he had undergone a vasectomy. The surgery was irreversible. Audrey's face, according to Holden's own recollection preserved by Epstein, froze in the expression of a hurt and bewildered child. Trust, once so complete, fractured in that instant. She ended the relationship on the spot. It was not a decision made in anger. It was the recognition that the dream she had carried since she was a little girl watching her father disappear could not be fulfilled with the man she loved. The aftermath was swift and public in its own way. Paramount arranged an engagement party for Audrey and Mel Ferrer, the actor she had known before Sabrina, at the very house Holden shared with his wife. The irony was not lost on anyone present. Audrey married Ferrer in a quiet Swiss ceremony in September 1954. She endured miscarriages and a stillbirth before Sean was born in 1960. Motherhood became the center of her existence. She rearranged film schedules, turned down projects, and found her deepest contentment away from cameras. The marriage to Ferrer lasted 14 years and ended in divorce amid rumors of infidelity on both sides. A second marriage, to Italian psychiatrist Andrea Dotti, brought another son, Luca, and another slow unraveling marked by repeated affairs. Through it all the memory of what had been possible with Holden lingered. They worked together once more, a decade after Sabrina, on Paris When It Sizzles. The production was plagued by rain, delays, and Holden's worsening alcoholism. He arrived in Paris already carrying the weight of unfinished feelings. One night, according to accounts that circulated among the crew, he climbed a tree outside her dressing room simply to catch a glimpse of her. Audrey, by then a mother and a more guarded woman, kept her distance. She later told friends she felt only pity for the man whose drinking had begun to erode the confidence that once drew her to him. They finished the film as professionals. The personal chapter remained closed. In the years that followed, Holden's life continued its downward spiral. He never fully recovered from the loss of Audrey. Friends observed that many of his later excesses seemed like attempts to fill an absence that alcohol could not touch. He died in 1981 at 63 after a fall in his home, alone. Audrey was deeply saddened by the news. By then she had found a different kind of peace with the Dutch actor Robert Wolders. Their relationship, begun in 1980, was free of the Hollywood pressures and the desperate need that had marked earlier attachments. They never married, yet those closest to her described Wolders as the companion who finally offered the steady loyalty she had sought for so long. He was with her through the diagnosis of abdominal cancer and held her hand when she died in January 1993, also at 63. Barry Paris, in his authoritative biography Audrey Hepburn, notes that what Audrey wanted above all was to be married to a decent man and to have children. The statement is simple, almost austere, yet it explains the choices that shaped her private life more clearly than any tabloid speculation. The affair with Holden was brief, measured in months rather than years, but its emotional residue outlasted longer relationships because it forced her to confront the gap between love and the one non-negotiable desire that defined her. She chose the possibility of motherhood over the man who had made her feel most seen. That choice brought her the son she adored and the family she had lacked, yet it also left an open question that neither of them ever fully answered. What might have been if the irreversible had not stood between them? In the final years of her life, Audrey devoted herself to UNICEF work with a passion that seemed to draw on every earlier experience of hunger and abandonment. She traveled to famine zones, held malnourished children, and spoke with a moral clarity that surprised those who knew only the fashion icon. The little girl who had ground tulip bulbs into flower and watched trains disappear into the distance had become a woman determined that other children would not suffer the same voids. That work, more than any film, may have been the true resolution of the longings that once led her into Holden's arms and then out of them. Looking back across the decades, the story of Audrey Hepburn and William Holden refuses the neat contours of tragedy or romance. It is quieter than that, more human. Two people found each other at a moment when both were ready to believe in permanence, only to discover that the future one of them needed was biologically closed to the other. She walked away to protect a dream larger than either of them. He spent the rest of his life measuring other women against the one who had left. The films they made together remain luminous. The private history between them remains a study in the cost of choosing what cannot be compromised. Audrey Hepburn never publicly named Holden as the man who broke her heart in the dramatic fashion later documentaries sometimes claim. Yet the evidence of letters, recollections, and the careful work of biographers leaves little doubt that the wound was real and lasting. In the end, she found a measure of the security she had sought since childhood. The price of that security included the knowledge that the deepest romantic connection of her early career had been sacrificed to the possibility of becoming a mother. That knowledge, carried with characteristic grace, is part of the complicated legacy of a woman the world still sees as the embodiment of elegance, even while the private record reveals someone far more scarred, far more determined, and far more human than the image ever allowed. What remains is the image of two people under California stars listening to ballet music, believing for a brief season that the future might be written differently. The music ended. The future took another path. And the heart, as Audrey herself once understood better than most, remembers what the will decides to leave behind.